The physician handed me a confidential message, which my Amish spouse discovered later that evening. The oil remaining in our kitchen table lamp was only sufficient to burn for another 60 minutes, and Eli was examining my note by its dim glow. He had maintained absolute silence since retrieving the paper from the interior pocket of my Sunday coat. Standing in the entranceway clad in my nightgown, my bare feet resting against the chilly pine planks, I watched his thumb track across the doctor's handwriting. The kettle I had heated earlier retained a lingering warmth, and a solitary moth fluttered around the glass chimney. My husband of 9 years kept his gaze cast down, speaking only in a quiet murmur to instruct me to come and sit. At that moment, I realized that taking a step forward meant consenting to whatever consequences would follow. I knew the document was small enough to be consumed by fire in a mere 3 seconds, and that I should have destroyed it the very moment Dr. Hollis placed it in my hand, yet I had kept it intact. To explain why I remained motionless in that doorway at 10 o'clock on an October Tuesday, I must recount the spring when my mother first explained that a virtuous wife never questions the inner workings of her own body. I am 61 years old today, residing by myself in a modest rented home on the outskirts of a town completely unconnected to the Amish world. The settlement where I spent my youth was nestled in a serene valley in northern Indiana, a place where gravel roads persisted until I was nearly 30, and where the mandates of the bishop carried far greater authority than any official document from the county. As the third of 7 siblings, I watched my father tend to the dairy cattle while my mother raised us, witnessing a pervasive quiet between them that I misidentified as harmony for many years. My marriage to Eli Yoder occurred when I was 20 and he was 24. Being the second son of an esteemed household, he requested my hand from my father before we had ever exchanged a complete sentence. This arrangement did not trouble me, as it was the established custom in our district. What did disturb me, though I kept it entirely to myself, was his gaze during our wedding feast. It lacked the warmth of a young groom looking at his partner, resembling instead a farmer evaluating a newly purchased horse, searching for flaws he might have overlooked at the auction. Our initial year together was not harsh. Eli proved to be reliable, industrious, and economical with his speech. He constructed a clothesline for me out back without being prompted and brought home a small wooden stool to support my feet while I pared apples. Had anyone inquired about my contentment during that period, I would have answered affirmatively, simply because I possessed no alternative experience for comparison. The friction commenced with our lack of children. By our second wedding anniversary, my mother began observing me with a distinct expression following Sunday services. By the 3rd year, my sisters-in-law excluded me from conversations regarding breastfeeding, teething, and sleepless nights. By the 4th year, Eli's mother, Fanny, took to arriving at our home unannounced, inspecting my kitchen as if searching for proof of some failing. She once inquired if I was consuming enough beets or utilizing the cold compresses she had recommended. On another occasion, she abruptly remarked that certain women gripped themselves too tightly, noting that the Lord cannot work within a clenched fist. I recall setting down the dish I was drying, knowing that if I maintained my grip, it would have shattered on the floor. Eli never raised his voice throughout those years. He merely extended his hours out at the barn. He limited his presence in the house strictly to mealtimes and looked at me when he looked at me at all, with that identical appraisal from our wedding feast. In our 5th year, Bishop Rabber came to visit us, sitting in our parlor with his hat resting on his knee. He gently suggested that there were specific prayers a married couple could offer together, and noted that English physicians in the nearby town occasionally provided assistance. He avoided my gaze during the latter suggestion, directing his eyes solely at Eli. My husband responded that we would pray, and the bishop nodded as if a matter had been resolved between them that required no input from me. So I prayed in the garden, in the cellar, and in the narrow gap beside our mattress where the floor stayed cold even during August heat, yet nothing altered. By the 7th year, Fanny presented me with a brew she claimed her own mother had utilized, a concoction tasting of bitter roots masked by a subtle sweetness that left my head heavy for days. She returned with more the following week, and the week after that. I swallowed the mixtures because open refusal felt more dangerous than compliance, because Eli monitored me as I drank them, and because a quiet part of my mind had begun to accept that my own anatomy was flawed, making any remedy, no matter how peculiar, my duty to endure. It was during our 8th year of marriage that I first visited Dr. Hollis, though I did not go unaccompanied initially. Eli transported me in the buggy to the modest clinic located on the fringes of Shipshawana, waiting out front with his hat in his hands before joining me in the examination room when my name was called. Dr. Hollis was a tall, soft-spoken physician in his 50s, distinguished by graying temples and a tendency to record notes before speaking aloud. He directed questions toward me, though Eli supplied the majority of the answers. When the doctor inquired if I experienced any physical pain, Eli noted that I had never voiced any complaints. When asked if my cycles were regular, Eli remarked that they seemed so from his observations. Dr. Hollis looked at me just once in that moment, a fleeting glance resembling a man evaluating a window he suspects has been sealed shut with paint. He performed the medical assessment with Eli present, drew blood samples, and indicated he would contact us upon receiving the findings. A fortnight later, a letter arrived addressed to my husband, which he reviewed at the table without offering to show me. He reported that everything appeared standard and that we simply needed to persist. When I requested to see the document, Eli folded it away into his desk drawer, stating there was nothing inside intended for my eyes. I want to exercise care in recounting this, as I have no desire to portray Eli as a malicious man, which he was not. He genuinely believed he was shielding me, acting within a community where a husband mediated between his wife and the external world, just as a roof shields a household from rainfall. He determined what gained entry and what was excluded. If Eli concealed the medical assessment, it was because he was raised to believe a wife's anxiety was a burden meant for the husband to bear, a philosophy passed down directly from his father. Yet a protective barrier can easily transform into a restrictive enclosure. During our 9th year, I returned to Dr. Hollis a second time, on an occasion when Eli was unable to accompany me due to a cow experiencing a difficult labor in the night. He arranged for our neighbor's English driver, an amiable older woman named Linda, to transport me, and she remained outside in her vehicle engrossed in a book. Crossing that waiting room unescorted brought a sensation I had not felt in years, as if the very air belonged to me alone. Dr. Hollis secured the door behind us, took a seat opposite me without grabbing his pen, and revealed he had wished to speak with me privately for quite some time. I remained silent, not having experienced a private conversation with a man outside my family since my late teens. He inquired about my well-being, free from the sharp suspicion characteristic of Eli's mother, speaking instead with the tenderness my grandmother used to show when I was a child with a skinned knee. I confessed my exhaustion and disclosed the details of the herbal brews. His demeanor made it possible for me to reveal that my monthly cycles had ceased nearly 2 years prior, a detail I had hidden simply because I lacked the knowledge to judge if it was significant. He listened intently without taking notes, and upon my completion, asked if I was aware of the contents of the correspondence he had forwarded to my spouse the previous year, assuring me I only needed to answer if I felt comfortable. When I replied in the negative, he paused for a considerable moment before explaining that medical regulations prohibited him from providing another person's mail, but offered to draft a unique letter intended solely for me. I agreed before I even fully processed the decision. He spent roughly 3 minutes writing, folded the document into quarters without using an envelope, and pressed it directly into my hand. Closing my fingers around the paper, he spoke softly, instructing me to read it only when entirely alone, away from both house and barn, where no one could interrupt, and cautioned me against letting anyone else view it beforehand. When I questioned the contents, he stated it contained information regarding my right to know my own body, alongside one final detail. I refrained from asking about that final detail, already gripped by apprehension. I returned to Linda's vehicle with the document pressed flat against my midsection beneath my apron, keeping my hands motionless in my lap throughout the journey so she would suspect nothing. Upon my arrival, Eli was cleaning up at the water pump, looking up to inquire about the doctor's assessment. I mirrored his previous words exactly, claiming the doctor found everything standard and advised us to keep trying. The falsehood escaped my lips with a fluid ease that genuinely unnerved me. That occurred on a Monday, and I allowed Tuesday morning to pass without unfolding the paper, keeping it concealed within the lining of my Sunday coat at the back of the bedroom wardrobe, as I could not identify a single corner of our home that belonged truly to me. Tuesday afternoon brought another visit from Fanny, who monitored me as I consumed the tea she provided. She remarked that Eli had mentioned my return to the clinic, noting that I had gone unescorted. When I explained that Linda had transported me, she clarified her meaning, pointing out that I was alone in the examination room. I offered no response. Setting down her cup, she stated that a wife who harbors secrets from her spouse keeps them from God, adding with a deceptive softness that I must disclose whatever the physician said to Eli that very night. Sitting there, I recognized that Fanny was already privy to information withheld from me, realizing Eli had consulted her before I even stepped back inside our house. The letter from the previous year had not remained isolated in Eli's desk drawer, it had circulated through unseen hands. Once she departed, I retrieved the Sunday coat from the wardrobe, reaching into the lining to confirm the folded document remained. I hesitated on the edge of the bed, on the verge of unfolding it to finally comprehend 2 years of physical silence. But the sound of Eli's boots on the veranda prompted me to return the garment to its place and descend to prepare evening dinner. That night, Eli's silence was more pronounced than usual as he dined without making a single comment. He conducted the customary scripture reading afterward with an unwavering voice, closing the volume before looking across the space to ask if there was anything I wished to share with him. When I stated there was not, he gave a slow nod and instructed me to head up to bed, promising to follow shortly. I retreated upstairs, lying awake to track his movements below as he entered the parlor, ascended the stairs, and bypassed our bedroom to reach the wardrobe at the end of the corridor where my Sunday coat resided. I heard the distinct creak of the closet door. Throughout the decades since, I have questioned my failure to rise, my failure to intervene or call his name. The ultimate truth is that after 9 years of instruction dictating that my husband held rights to every facet of my existence, I had not yet grasped that a simple piece of paper could belong exclusively to me. He walked back down the corridor but bypassed our room entirely, returning downstairs to the kitchen table where I heard the faint adjustment of the oil lamp. Eventually, I followed the sound down, returning to the scene where this account opened, myself framed by the doorway, Eli seated at the table with the unfolded paper between his fingers, repeating his request for me to sit. I complied, and he maintained his characteristic quiet tone. Turning the document so I could view it, I finally read the words Dr. Hollis had intended for me. The opening section explained in clear medical terms that my blood analysis from the prior year indicated a thyroid imbalance, which was the direct source of my infertility and the cessation of my cycles. He noted the condition was easily managed with inexpensive medication that frequently allowed women to conceive within 12 months, adding that he had detailed all of this to my husband the previous spring. The subsequent passage was brief, revealing he had warned my spouse in that same correspondence that the herbal teas provided by a family member contained components that actively suppressed the exact hormone my thyroid required, meaning continued consumption would worsen my health permanently. He had urged an immediate cessation of the brews. The final segment consisted of merely 2 lines, expressing his regrets and asserting that a patient deserved access to her own diagnosis, concluding that he should have found a mechanism to inform me a year prior. I scanned the words twice before looking up at Eli, who displayed no anger, a reaction I had not anticipated. Instead, he appeared fatigued, slightly apologetic, and profoundly frightened, offering the defense that his mother believed the tea would provide aid. When I reminded him he received the letter a year ago, he claimed he failed to comprehend the entirety of it, though I countered that he understood sufficiently to conceal it in his drawer. Following a protracted silence, he uttered the words that have remained with me for 3 decades, explaining that if I had known the truth, I would have abandoned the teas, which would have revealed to his mother that he had permitted me to make my own choice. That realization constituted the true betrayal. It was not the herbal mixtures, the locked drawer, or the 12 months of hidden truth. It was that my husband prioritized his mother's approval over my physical well-being, executing the choice so quietly that he had nearly convinced himself it was an act of devotion. I shed no tears at the table. I returned the document to its original folds, slid it into my nightgown pocket, and announced my return to bed, which he allowed without protest. I remained awake until the initial morning light entered the room, contemplating the livestock, the spring garden, the footstool he had crafted, Fanny's grip on the teacup, and the bishop's averted gaze. I recalled Linda mentioning her daughter who worked as a nurse several states away. By daybreak, my path was clear, though I did not depart immediately. This is not an account of an instantaneous flight. I remained through the autumn harvest because the labor demanded it. However, I ceased drinking the infusions, traveled with Linda to a physician in an entirely different municipality, and commenced the therapy Dr. Hollis had outlined. I kept this entirely from Eli and Fanny, concealing the small medication bottle inside a needle tin at the base of my sewing basket for 4 months, consuming one each morning with my coffee while Eli tended to the barn. Come February, I drafted a letter of my own, placing it on the table beside the lamp. Carrying a solitary bag, my Sunday coat, and the physician's note, I rode with Linda to the Elkhart bus depot before sunrise. My journey did not take me far, ending in the municipality where Linda's daughter resided, who assisted me in securing employment within a local hospital laundry. Within a 12-month span, I began training as a nurse's assistant. I reached my 30th year before learning to interpret a thermometer, and my 32nd before placing my signature on a housing lease. Children were never part of my life, as the medical intervention arrived too late, or perhaps the years of herbal infusions had accomplished their intended purpose. I have reconciled myself to never knowing the definitive cause. I never crossed paths with Eli again, though he forwarded 2 letters during my first year away. The initial correspondence requested my return, while the second, arriving 6 months later, acknowledged his understanding of my decision to stay away, noting he had instructed his mother to cease providing teas to the new wife the bishop had assisted him in finding. That secondary letter remains in the same drawer as the physician's note, representing the only 2 documents I have ever truly possessed. I am aware that within the settlement I am spoken of, when I am mentioned at all, as the woman who departed because she could not endure her inability to bear children. While that narrative is false, I no longer attempt to revise it. The actual truth is far more concise and severe. I departed because a stranger in a medical office transcribed 4 paragraphs on a sheet of paper, and because the man I wedded could not tolerate my awareness of them. I think occasionally of Dr. Hollis, who passed away nearly 20 years ago, and whom I never thanked in writing, lacking the words to express it without causing mutual awkwardness. Yet on the evening of my departure from Indiana, as the bus exited Elkhart and the dark countryside rolled past, I retrieved the document from my coat, pressed it against the glass, and reviewed it once more by the passing town lights, finally comprehending the nature of that one final detail. It was simply the validation required not to dictate staying or leaving, but merely to possess knowledge of my own existence. That realization was what my husband encountered that night, not a message from a rival or a confession, but the physical manifestation of a woman beginning to claim ownership of herself. He had reviewed it, placed it on the table, and illuminated the room because some intuitive part of him recognized it was the final element of my life he would ever hold. If this narrative resonates with your own experiences, please consider sharing your perspective with others who might benefit from hearing it.